Hello everyone, how's it going? It is Tyranor as always, and I wanted to bring you another top whatever list. This time it is the top 9 villains. Now, a word before we begin. This list is the top villains. I'm judging the characters based on what they did as villains or on the road to becoming one, and not so much on their overall character. I'll explain a bit more once I get to number 8. Other than that, here we go. Number 9 on my list is Arthas. He was kind of bound to appear on my list since he's so iconic to the Warcraft universe. Arthas fits the, so to say, Anakin Skywalker stereotype, although in his case I'd say it's a better and more justifiable story. Arthas was well portrayed as a young man who genuinely loved his people and who was forced to make tough decisions and in hindsight chose the bad ones. And his descent into evil, while one could argue is a bit predictable, still is a good and intriguing story, both in Warcraft 3 and in Christie Golden's novelization. As a villain, Arthas is in many ways the antithesis of his once good side, while still being recognizable as Arthas and not a different person, if that makes sense. I also like the mentions of the inner conflict he goes through and how it made the Lich King to be a bit more than the typical mustache-twirling villain. As to the Lich King himself, he is easily recognizable, often even by people who are not fans of Warcraft, and like I mentioned previously, he is iconic and thoroughly unique in the Warcraft universe. Number 8 on my list is Ner'Zhul. Now, here's what I talked about in the beginning comes into play. Ner'Zhul is my all-time favorite character. However, being a villain is only part of his character. Ner'Zhul's rise to villainhood came at first from genuine concern for his people, coupled with his own personal ambition. And one thing that I like about Ner'Zhul's character is that every time he starts thinking about his personal ambition over his people or his Burning Legion masters, he loses. First losing his position to Gul'dan and watching his people become enslaved to demons. Then he was seduced by Gul'dan's skull to the point where he yelled, "I am the Horde," and then being captured and tortured by Kil'jaeden for his hubris. And finally manipulating Arthas and breaking free from the Legion's control went, at first according to his plan, before Ner'Zhul's spirit was killed by Arthas inside the Lich King's consciousness. As a villain, Ner'Zhul is responsible for many of Azshara's woes, from unwittingly corrupting the orcs to destroying Draenor to engineering the Scourge, and despite the fact that he might be an unwilling villain, he still succeeds at being a menacing and a very serious one. Number 7 might seem as a bit of a weird one. It is Hakkar the Soulflayer. I personally find the Troll Pantheon to be a very interesting one, and I even have my own theories to go along with it, but Hakkar has a very special status within it. Every other Loa fears him and opposes him, although whether that is because of what he is or just the influence he has among trolls is unclear. The Troll Pantheon is very similar to the Greek gods in their, so to say, orange and blue mentality, as opposed to black and white, and it is still rather unclear if Hakkar is, say for example like Hades, shunned but still part of the Pantheon, or like one of the primeval creatures the Greek gods defeated and imprisoned. Hakkar came to the Gurubashi trolls in their time of need and assisted them in exchange for sacrifices, which became eventually so plentiful that an entire revolution against Hakkar's priesthood occurred. After gathering his power and being defeated by adventurers, he was revived by the Gurubashi and Zandalari trolls, ironically turning to his power in their time of need, despite how much they opposed him before. I also really liked his encounter in the new Zul'Gurub instance, where Jindo, formerly his greatest servant, is trying to drain his power, only to be defeated and then destroyed by Hakkar himself. I personally enjoyed the vengeful god archetype in fiction, and the whole dynamic between Hakkar, the trolls and the other Loa is very unique and very interesting to me. Number 6 on my list is Deathwing. Deathwing turned from the noble and warm-hearted dragon Nefarian, the Earth Warder, to the utter monstrosity that he is, or was rather. I don't think there's any single villain who better represents how evil and twisted they've become than Deathwing, who turned from what could be considered a noble-looking dragon to a literal monster who needs to be welded together with metal to even be held together. Other than the immense force of destruction that he is, Deathwing is also a masterful manipulator, coming close to tearing the Alliance apart from within after the Second War and succeeded in creating the Demon Soul, taking much of the power of the other dragons with it. Deathwing is an utterly unredeemable character, but is not one-dimensional, not really, as the short story Charge of the Aspects demonstrates. In addition, he definitely made a big impact on those who played Cataclysm, due to the really great opening cinematic and him being very present in the story of the expansion. Number 5 on my list is Queen Azshara. I personally find her character to be a very interesting one, along with her mentality as a villain. Azshara was raised knowing that she was the best the Night Elves had to offer, to the point where they even renamed their capital to Zinajari, the glory of Azshara, something to which Queen Azshara took offense to and desired to eventually change the name of the capital to simply be Azshara. I also found her delusions throughout the War of the Ancients to be very interesting, how she thought that when Sargeras would step onto Azeroth, she would seduce and marry him. Unlike other such characters, however, Azshara did have a staggering amount of power, to the point where she could magically block a swing of Manorov's glaive without even raising a hand, and it is presumed that she grew even more powerful as she was transformed into a Naga. Her power and status led to her being worshipped by her people, and later by the Naga, to the point where the Night Elves who fought against the Legion during the War of the Ancients thought they were liberating their queen instead of opposing her. Number 4 on my list is Kil'jaeden. Unlike Archimonde or the other Lords of the Burning Legion, who seem to kill rather indiscriminately, Kil'jaeden is very methodical and very cunning in his approach, and was tasked by Sargeras with seeking out and recruiting other races for the ranks of the Burning Legion. Unlike Archimonde as well, who immediately kills anyone who fails, Kil'jaeden is also willing to give them another chance, or even a third if he thinks they are really trying, reasoning that those who feared him would flee rather than serve, and those who sniffed reward and approval would stay. I think, perhaps more so than Sargeras himself, that Kil'jaeden represents the devil of the Warcraft universe, or at least the aspects of the devil which tend mortals to do evil. Ever since Sargeras possessed Aegwynn and later Medivh, Kil'jaeden also acted as commander-in-chief of the Legion, and he's described in Valen's short story to pretty much casually invading and blowing up planets. So yeah, Kil'jaeden. Number 3 on my list is someone whom I've talked about before, Nefarian, the first son of Deathwing. I think perhaps that Nefarian is one of the more unique villains of the Warcraft universe. Unlike other dragons who rely on their natural brawn or on their magic, Nefarian relies on his minions and on his various experiments. He's the one who invented the chromatic dragonflight and whose research formed the basis for the eventual creation of the Twilight Dragonflight. While he might not be quite as major of a villain as the others on this list, I still quite like Nefarian for being so unique and, frankly, really cool. Number 2 on my list is Gul'dan, Darkness Incarnate. In contrast with the aforementioned Ner'Zhul, who only sometimes strayed from his path in order to gain power for himself, Gul'dan never had such qualms, willingly damning his people, betraying his master, and committing genocide for the sake of power. He has no loyalty other than to himself, having no qualms about betraying those who are otherwise giving him power, such as Ner'Zhul or Medivh. Aside from his evil, he is also incredibly intelligent, successfully manipulating the orcs to the extent that they changed the entirety of what they were as a culture and a race for his purposes. And even when he stood at Orgrim Doomhammer's feet about to die, he managed to talk his way out of his execution, and even managed to fool Doomhammer to the point where Gul'dan had an opportunity to desert, effectively crippling the Horde. While he might not necessarily be a fighter himself, preferring to let others do the dirty work, he is nonetheless the most powerful mortal warlock, to the point where he even changed the geography of the world for his needs. And number 1 is...
A time will come when you will answer for your crimes. I answer to no one! All who challenge me will burn in the fires of my hatred.
Number 1 on my list is a really controversial one, Garrosh Hellscream. It's controversial both for being a controversial character and for the fact that I put him this high on my list. So I'm going to reiterate that this list represents my subjective opinion. You are free to disagree. I personally like the idea of the old Orcish horde as opposed to that of the new horde. I think Garrosh is obviously a complicated character, but one who adheres to what he sees as being the true horde. See what I did there? He is among those who think that Thrall made a mistake settling the orcs in the middle of a desert. He thinks that it is wrong that, say, the Night Owls not only do not trade their abundance of wood, but also continue to attack his people. And perhaps he might not have been wrong, but he definitely chose an extreme when dealing with these situations. I think that the fact that people are still having arguments about the guy proves that there is something to him. Nonetheless, regarding his villainy, I think he made the Horde badass again in Cataclysm and in Mists of Pandaria, and I think his rise to villainhood is a very interesting one, like I said. And this brings us to the end of another Top Whatever list. Leave any suggestions or any thoughts in the comments below, I love reading them, and I will see you all next time. Farewell.